Today is Tuesday the 9th, Gender Day. We were going to have our interview with the Olympians today. Listeners sadly will have to wait for that. Even more sadly, this is because the Olympians have caught COVID. They are okay, but of course they have to self-isolate. So this interview has been postponed, but definitely not cancelled. As a teasing introduction to that interview, you'll recall a video produced last week by Hannah Mills, a British Olympic sailor, and the British Olympic rower Melissa Wilson, with more than 50 Olympians and Paralympians, including Eliud Kipchoge, Tom Daley, Andy Murray, so on, all calling on world leaders to deliver on climate action where, and this has to hit home as tensions are heightened significantly in the week 2 negotiations, where the athletes state they too have faced challenges and obstacles, but overcame them, and all calling on world leaders to do the same. This initiative, Athletes Calling on World Leaders to Take Climate Action, is openly supported by the International Olympics Committee, and they've pointed out the IOC itself has pledged to be climate positive by 2024, and how sustainability is a fundamental pillar of the Olympic agenda. As part of this, from 2030 onwards, the IOC it will require that the Games themselves will be climate positive, not just the IOC itself. And Paris, taking heed of that, is already working on staging climate positive Olympic Games ahead of the target in 2024. In their statement, the IOC said, "Sport has the power to make the world a better place, and today we have an opportunity to use this power in the face of climate change." So that's wonderful stuff there. And there is a UKELA connection here because Melissa Wilson, in addition to being a superstar Olympian, is also a superstar legal mind and past winner of the UKELA moot. So we will speak with Melissa in due course and wish her speedy recovery. Now, moving on to Gender Day, I do want to note the disappointing news that Saudi Arabia has required that all language concerning gender equality is entirely removed from the draft text. They've also required the removal of language on climate education, the removal of all language referring to human rights, and they continue to oppose any mention of fossil fuels in a document concerning climate change. So clearly very difficult negotiations given the need for consensus amongst all states. And Alok Sharma hasn't shied away from that. He is confirming in his press releases and speeches to the COP delegations, negotiations are difficult. The club of obstructors is, however, getting smaller. Brazil's still in that club. Their delegation is, however, from what I understand, speaking to members of that delegation, divided, albeit not openly. Australia, even more disappointingly and frustratingly, is actively taking an obstructionist position. They were called out by Obama on Monday, doing what he could to name and shame. But I have to say the real stars of the day here are the female politicians, which is wonderfully in line with today's theme, gender. Not just present female politicians, past female politicians. So Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland, has gone around openly naming and shaming whoever she can, as publicly as she can, for failing to allow progress to be made in the negotiations. Nancy Pelosi is here doing the same. And AOC, otherwise known as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is here giving a huge boost of support to the young protesters outside and talking about Iron Brew wherever she can, because that seems to be getting a lot of social media traction. So the show of force by female leaders was great, but we cannot forget how unequal the world as a whole remains for women, and that climate change will only make it more unequal, hence the theme of gender today. In his presidency speech today, Alok Sharma repeated a truly devastating statistic, which is that research carried out by the Malala Fund found that at least 4 million girls will not complete their education due to climate change impacts that are being felt right now. So that is this year, and this year alone, some 4 million girls are not benefiting from education due to climate change. So the announcements made today were really important and really welcome. Bolivia is going to reflect gender data in its nationally determined contributions, and it's going to work with UN Women to promote the use of gender breakdowns in official national statistics on environment and on climate change. What you measure, you can manage. So this is a really hopeful model for other countries to follow down the line. Canada is going to ensure that 80% of all its climate investments over the next 5 years target gender equality outcomes. Ecuador, and again, monitoring and measuring is going to be essential to that. Ecuador, Germany, Norway, Nigeria, Sweden, the US, and the UK have all announced gender-based climate action with specific programs and, importantly, identified funding for those programs announced. An announcement that will make lawyers' hearts sing. Sierra Leone announced today that it is going to end long-standing discriminatory land tenure practices, which denied women access to and control of land through putting in place new legislation. The INSU Resilience Centre of Excellence for Gender-Smart Climate Solutions was announced. That's going to be a repository of information and knowledge exchange platform. And that's going to provide access to knowledge and opportunities within the context of climate and disaster risk finance and insurance. So not gender-based, but nonetheless an important initiative all the same. All too rare good news came from Lebanon. Rise 2030, which is an award-winning grassroots initiative in Lebanon, was supported today and highlighted with a view to getting further funding. And that initiative is to empower women in Lebanon, as well as youth who are frontline change makers and frontline change experiencers, by providing them with the power and the funding to design, create, and build climate-conscious solutions in Lebanon. Funding has already been announced by Canada and Germany. And an encouraging statistic there, some 42% of the beneficiaries of this scheme are refugees within Lebanon. A new toolkit was announced from the Two Times Collaborative to support the finance community when making climate finance investments, to be conscious of and take action towards closing gender gaps, and that's ranging across a variety of different sectors. There was the launch of Gender Equity Diversity Investments, a $100 to $150 million venture capital firm. This is presently has a 200-person network already of senior figures and experts signed up to it, and it's going to progress investments in line with several SDG Sustainable Development Goals, which of course include action on gender equality. All of these announcements will further implement the Gender Action Plan, which has been agreed last year at COP25, and all of them come ahead of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, and that takes place March next year, March 2022, and that's going to focus on gender equality in the context of climate change, the environment, and disaster risk reduction. A lot's happening on this issue. A lot of exciting work is being done. And in a very short time frame, by March next year, international scrutiny will again be focused on this issue. And that scrutiny will focus on whether pledges have moved to action. So a very exciting, very busy Gender Day here at COP26.